also taken on some role as a teacher now. So I know you're like dealing with students.
Mm-hmm.
How has your perspective shifted as a student by being a teacher? What have you? What were your previous thoughts and feelings about teachers that may have shifted now?
Huh. Yeah, so I guess at FSU I teach an improv class for non-majors, so people who probably haven't really played jazz. Most of the time they play like a string instrument, like
Right.
violin, cello, harp.
Mhm.
Had a harp student.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that class is that you don't really know something if you can't explain it to someone.
Right.
More times than not. Sometimes that said person might just not get it. But
Mhm.
if you're not able to explain something 10 different ways to
Right.
get that student to understand,
Mhm.
you probably don't know it as well as you think you do.
Right.
And that's probably, I'm sure most teachers would probably admit that to some extent. They
Sure.
probably admit that. And, it's kind of hard to swallow. It's like, I thought I knew this.
Yeah. Right.
I thought
Right.
I knew what this sounded like or what
Mhm.
this meant, but I can't really put it into words.
For sure.
And I guess as musicians, sometimes after you've been doing it for a while, or just artists in general,
Right.
like if things come naturally, you take for granted like the process of having learned it.
Sure.
And everyone's process is a lot differently.
Mhm.
Like I started off as a more classical musician all the way through high school for the
Right.
most part, up until like my senior year.
Mhm.
So I relate to my students at FSU pretty well because it's not that far off for me.
Sure.
And those guys are playing classical music, most of them, classical or new music, and it's not far off from jazz. So like I try to bridge the gap in some way and connect it back to something that they already do. You
Right.
know, like conventional theory that we teach in schools is the basis for jazz theory. It's not quite as in depth, but a triad is the same in any genre of
Right.
music. So and the way that people approach playing over it is gonna be very similar,
Right.
regardless of if it's pop music, jazz, whatever.
Mhm.
So I try and just get across to them that music is music, it's sound. Sound doesn't necessarily change.
Mhm.
There's nothing really all that different besides the improvisational aspect of jazz, but there's not too much different between classical and jazz sonically.
Right.
Jazz is more dissonant, I guess. But,
Right.
20th century classical music is pretty dissonant.
Right.
Dissonant, like Debussy is, pretty similar to a lot of
Yeah,
jazz
man.
harmony.
Definitely.
And a lot of the Russian composers have really intense rhythmic aspects to their music,
Mhm.
just like jazz comes from that African tradition.
Right.
Those aren't too far apart,
Mhm.
and that's what I feel like intimidates people when we're playing different genres of music. It's like, oh, I've never done this before. I don't know how to improvise or whatever. But honestly, if you played a Bach chorale or Bach sonata over some jazz chord changes at a gig, people probably be like, "Man, you sound great."
That was killer.
Yeah,
That was killer. Yeah.
Chords and whatnot, tension
Mhm.
and release is the same in most genres of music.
Yeah.
5 chords go to 1.
Right. They do, man.
So and it's a lot simpler than what it sounds like.
For sure.
And I really try and simplify that class when I'm teaching, because in school we get beat over the head with a lot of things at once, and it just makes it feel complicated.
Right.
And I just try and make them feel comfortable enough to make mistakes or whatever.
Sure.
And with a lot of the students, they get so caught up in I gotta play the right notes or whatever. In my experience with my class, and even me when I'm practicing,
Right.
so gotta play the right notes.
Mhm.
But just relax and probably play less.
Right. Right.
And it works out. I've taught the class for 2 semesters now, and the first day of class and the last day of class is always night and day.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I don't necessarily think that's a result of my incredible teaching.
Mhm.
I think it's just people starting to stop boxing themselves in, well, boxing their ears in, really,
Right.
and just kind of playing.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how quickly people will pick up, musicians will pick up on things, because I've always think music is pretty intuitive. That's why
Sure.
we have the whole DIY scene, people making
Right.
making music, whole albums on cell phones and whatnot.
Yeah, man, that shit crazy.
It's like it's hard because we make it hard, not
Right,
necessarily
right,
because
right.
it's just like this super like left brain or right brain thing. And you know, anybody can do it. You just gotta figure out where you fit in. Everybody's not gonna play drums, you know.
Right.
Everyone's not gonna sing. Some people might make beats or whatever, and it's just like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is we overthink a lot of things, and I guess just music school makes us overthink it, and to a certain extent we have to overthink things sometimes to just kind of push ourselves.
Right.
But when you're trying to do something new, which is, I guess, the class I'm teaching people who haven't done this before, you just kind of got to relax and clear your brain and not try and like feel as though you got to be incredible right now.
Right.
You know, you just got to do it.